Commander Dai of the Galactic Hegemony expansion fleet leaned forward in his command chair, studying the holographic display with narrowing eyes. His fleet of 50 warships had entered this unremarkable system expecting easy conquest, not this. Single vessel detected at coordinates 27 to 8403, reported Officer June, her voice tight with confusion. Unknown configuration. Size indicates a small patrol craft, but energy readings are unusual. Day flicked his primary appendages dismissively. This system was classified as containing a primitive species. Their first FTL experiments were detected only decades ago. The vessel is hailing us, Jum announced. The view screen activated, revealing a human female in a crisp blue uniform. Her posture conveyed neither fear nor submission. This is Captain Hannah of the United Nations Spaceship Vigilant. You have entered sovereign human territory. State your intentions or withdraw immediately. Day allowed himself a small gesture of amusement. This is Commander Dai of the Hegemony. Your species will surrender and integrate, or face extinction. You have one standard rotation to comply. Captain Hannah's expression remained unchanged. I suggest you reconsider, she replied evenly. This is your only warning. Day signaled to his weapons officer. Fire a demonstration shot. Disable their engines. The beam lanced out, and somehow missed as the human vessel performed a maneuver that defied Hegemony understanding of physics. Dad blinked all 4 of his eyes in rapid succession. He had never seen a ship move like that. The human vessel had seemingly twisted in space, rotating along an axis that should have torn its hull apart. How did they avoid our targeting systems? He demanded, rising from his command chair. Report. The weapons officer, Quan, tapped frantically at his console. Unknown, Commander. Our targeting was perfect. They moved faster than our weapons could track. Impossible, Dai hissed. No primitive species could develop such technology. Scan that vessel again. Officer June's fingers danced across her console. Commander, I'm detecting unusual energy spikes throughout their hull. It appears they're using some form of gravity manipulation technology. Gravity manipulation? Day's voice dropped to a whisper. The Hegemony had theorized such technology, but never successfully implemented it. That would explain the maneuverability. The communications officer interrupted. Commander, the human vessel is hailing us again. Day straightened his posture, smoothing down his ceremonial battle cloak. On screen, Captain Hannah appeared again, her face calm but stern. Your weapons fire constitutes an act of war against humanity. This is a final warning to withdraw your fleet immediately. Day felt a ripple of unease travel down his spine, but pride kept his voice steady. The Hegemony does not retreat. Perhaps you misunderstand your situation. You face 50 of our most advanced warships. One small patrol vessel cannot hope to prevail. Then you've made your choice. The human captain nodded to someone off-screen before the transmission cut. They terminated communications, reported the communications officer. Day returned to his command chair. All ships, combat formation Delta. Target their weapons and propulsion systems. Fire on my mark. The Hegemony fleet moved with practiced precision, spreading out to surround the solitary human vessel. On the tactical display, the UNSS Vigilant remained motionless, as if accepting its fate. Sir, Officer June said hesitantly, they're not attempting to escape or call for reinforcements. This doesn't match expected behavior patterns for an outmatched vessel. Dad considered this. It was indeed strange. Perhaps the humans were more alien in their thinking than intelligence had suggested. Or perhaps, could they be luring us into a trap? He wondered aloud. Scans detect no other vessels in the system, Quan reported. If reinforcements were coming, they would need to arrive via standard FTL corridors, which we are monitoring. Day nodded. Proceed with the attack. Fire. 49 ships fired simultaneously, a barrage of energy weapons and missiles converging on the tiny human vessel. It should have been obliterated instantly. Instead, the impossible happened. The Vigilant moved. not just evasively, but with a fluidity that made it appear to be swooning through space. Energy beams that should have struck true passed through empty vacuum. Missiles that adjusted course found themselves intercepted by precise point defense fire. And then the human ship began to respond. Small projectiles, almost invisible to hegemony sensors, launched from the Vigilant. They moved at velocities that the tactical computers initially registered as calculation errors. "Impact imminent," Quan shouted. The nearest hegemony cruiser shuddered as one of the human projectiles struck its hull. Instead of a conventional explosion, the point of impact seemed to collapse inward, as if space itself was being crushed. "What was that?" Dad demanded, watching in horror as the cruiser's midsection imploded. "Some form of gravitational weapon," Jun reported, her voice shaking. It created a localized gravity well that pulled the cruiser's hull in on itself. 2 more hegemony vessels suffered similar fates in quick succession. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Dai ordered. "Adjust targeting parameters. Deploy countermeasures." The elegant formation dissolved into chaos as the hegemony fleet scattered, trying to avoid the human vessel's weapons. The Vigilant pursued with relentless precision, seemingly anticipating their movements before they occurred. "Commander, we've lost contact with 6 ships already," the communications officer reported. "Fleet cohesion is breaking down." Day stared at the tactical display in disbelief. This was impossible. Inconceivable. One small patrol vessel was decimating his fleet, and they had barely managed to land a single hit in return. "Send the technical data to the rest of the fleet," he ordered. "Focus all analysis on finding a weakness in their defensive systems." As his crew scrambled to obey, Dai noticed something disturbing on the tactical feeds. The human vessel wasn't just evading, it was selecting targets with surgical precision. It disabled weapon systems first, then engines, leaving the hegemony ships adrift, but with life support intact. "They're not trying to destroy us," he realized aloud. "They're disabling us." "Sir," Officer Jun said, her voice barely audible, "I've completed the deep scan of their vessel. It's not even their most advanced ship. The energy signature suggests this is merely a scout vessel." Day felt a cold dread settle in his gut. If this was merely a scout, "Send a priority communication to the Hegemony Council," he ordered. "We've made a grave miscalculation. Request immediate." His words were cut short as the deck lurched beneath him. Warning alarms blared throughout the command center. "Direct hit to our primary propulsion system," Quan reported. "We're dead in space." The communications officer turned from his station, fear evident in his posture. "Commander, the human vessel is hailing us again." Day straightened his uniform, trying to maintain the dignity expected of a hegemony commander. On screen, Captain Hana's face appeared, her expression unchanged from earlier. "Commander Day, your fleet has been neutralized. We have disabled 23 of your vessels and can continue until all 50 are inoperable. Do you wish to reconsider your position on surrender?" Day looked around his command center. At the fear and confusion on his officers' faces, he had entered this system expecting an easy conquest, a simple addition to the hegemony's ever-expanding borders. Instead, he had encountered something the hegemony had never faced in its 1,000-year expansion, a species that was not just capable of defending itself, but of inflicting a humiliating defeat. "What are your terms?" he asked, his voice hollow with the acknowledgement of defeat. "Immediate withdrawal from human space," Captain Hana replied. "And a message to your leaders. Humanity values peace, but we are prepared for war. The choice of our future relationship is yours." As Da looked at the tactical display showing his once proud fleet now scattered and broken, he understood with perfect clarity what humans meant by the word regret. The Vigilant's response was immediate and devastating. Points of light erupted from its hull, intercepting incoming hegemony missiles with perfect precision. Then it fired weapons of its own. 3 cruisers critically damaged, shouted Officer Jun, panic evident in her voice. Their weapons, They are using kinetic impactors with some kind of phase technology. Day stared in disbelief as the human vessel executed another impossible maneuver, its hull briefly shimmering before reappearing behind a Hegemony destroyer. The smaller ship erupted in flames moments later. Impossible, Dai whispered. No species at their development stage should possess such technology. Intelligence Officer Tai approached the command station. Sir, our databases indicate humans evolved on a high-gravity, radiation-heavy world. Their history shows constant warfare. They've compressed millennia of weapons development into centuries. It doesn't matter, Dad declared, mandibles clicking with determination. We still outnumber them. All ships converge in attack. The command echoed through the fleet's communication network. The remaining 46 Hegemony vessels moved to surround the Vigilant, their formation tightening like a noose. Dad watched the tactical display with renewed confidence. No single ship, no matter how advanced, could withstand concentrated fire from so many directions. All ships, fire on my mark, he ordered. 3, 2, 1. Fire. The void of space lit up as energy beams and projectiles converged on the human vessel's position. For a brief moment, Day allowed himself to feel satisfaction. This would end the human resistance and restore the natural order. That satisfaction evaporated when the tactical display updated. The Vigilant had somehow split its defensive systems to counter attacks from multiple vectors simultaneously. A shimmering energy field appeared around the ship, not a standard shield, but something that seemed to bend the incoming fire away from the hull. What am I seeing? Dad demanded. Officer June's voice trembled as she replied. It appears to be some form of localized space-time distortion. They're bending the fabric of space itself to deflect our weapons. Before Dai could process this information, the Vigilant launched its counterattack. Small, dart-like projectiles shot from launchers along its hull, moving at velocities that strained the Hegemony sensor's ability to track. Evasive action, Dai ordered, but it was too late. The projectiles struck their targets with unerring accuracy. They didn't explode in the conventional sense. Instead, they simply passed through the outer hulls of the Hegemony ships as if the metal were no more substantial than vapor. 5 more ships reporting critical internal damage, the communications officer announced. The human weapons are phasing through our hulls and detonating inside our vessels. Day slammed his fist against his command console. How is this possible? Their technological level was assessed at barely post-planetary. Intelligence Officer Todd worked frantically at his station, pulling data from the Hegemony archives. Sir, I'm finding discrepancies in our intelligence. It appears our initial assessment was based on human civilian technology and public communications. We never penetrated their military networks. On the main screen, another Hegemony cruiser split apart as something detonated deep within its core. The explosion had an unusual bluish tint that Da had never seen before. What was that? He asked, his voice barely audible. Energy readings suggest antimatter. Officer June replied in disbelief. They're using controlled antimatter detonations. A cold feeling spread through Da's body. Antimatter weapons were theoretical even for the Hegemony. The energy requirements and containment problems had proven insurmountable for their scientists. Yet these humans were deploying them with apparent ease. Sir, Officer Ta said, his voice unnaturally calm. I've compiled a preliminary analysis of human military technology based on what we're observing. Would you like to hear it? Day nodded numbly as he watched another of his ships disintegrate on the tactical display. The humans appear to have developed along a different technological path than most species we've encountered. Their high-gravity homeworld forced unique adaptations in their spacecraft design. Additionally, their history is marked by constant internal warfare, driving weapons development at an accelerated pace. Ta brought up a series of images on a secondary display, historical records from the human world showing their progression from primitive projectile weapons to energy-based systems in a fraction of the time it had taken other species. Most concerning is this, Ta continued, highlighting sensor readings from the Vigilant. Their ship appears to be using an AI combat system far more advanced than our tactical computers. It's predicting our maneuvers before we execute them. Day watched as the Vigilant performed another impossible evasion, twisting in space to avoid concentrated fire from 3 hegemony vessels simultaneously. The human ship then fired a single projectile that somehow split into multiple targets mid-flight, striking all 3 attackers in sequence. "Commander, we've lost 11 ships now," the communications officer reported. 7 more are severely damaged and combat ineffective. Day's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of stress his species couldn't easily hide. Nearly half his fleet was already neutralized, and they had barely scratched the human vessel. But surrender was unthinkable. The Hegemony had never retreated in its 1,000-year history of expansion. "New strategy," Day announced. "All functional ships move to pattern Omega-6. Focus fire on a single point of their hull in sequence. No technology can defend against enough concentrated energy." The remaining Hegemony vessels repositioned themselves, creating a sphere around the Vigilant with precise gaps that would allow them to fire without risking hitting each other. It was a textbook maneuver, one that had broken the defenses of countless civilizations before. But as Dad watched the Vigilant on the tactical display, he noticed something disturbing. The human ship wasn't attempting to escape the formation. Instead, it was holding position at the exact center of the sphere, as if inviting the attack. "Sir," Officer June said hesitantly, "I'm detecting an unusual energy buildup within the human vessel. It's unlike anything in our databases." "Ignore it," Dad ordered. "All ships, prepare to fire on my mark. Target their propulsion systems. 3, 2, 1, fire." Energy beams from 30 Hegemony warships converged on the Vigilant's engines. For a brief moment, Day thought they had succeeded. The human ship seemed to flicker and distort under the barrage. Then reality itself seemed to bend around the Vigilant. A ripple of distortion expanded outward from the human ship, growing rapidly until it encompassed the entire Hegemony formation. Every ship caught in the wave suddenly lost power, their lights flickering and engines dying. "What happened?" Dad demanded as his own flagship's emergency systems activated. "Some kind of electromagnetic pulse," Officer Tay replied, working by the dim red emergency lighting. "But far more powerful than anything we've encountered. It penetrated our shields as if they weren't there." On the tactical display, now operating on backup power, Dad watched in horror as the Vigilant methodically approached each disabled Hegemony ship. The human vessel wasn't destroying them. It was systematically targeting weapons systems and engines with surgical precision, leaving the ships intact but helpless. "They could destroy us all," Day realized aloud, "but they're choosing not to." "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, to all ships simultaneously." Day straightened in his command chair, trying to maintain dignity even in defeat. "Put it through." Captain Hana's face appeared on the screen, her expression still calm and controlled. "Commander Day, this demonstration is complete. Your fleet has been neutralized without significant loss of life. I suggest you reconsider your position on the immediate surrender of human territory." Day looked around at his command center, at the faces of his crew illuminated only by emergency lighting, at the tactical display showing his proud fleet now disabled and drifting in space. The truth was unavoidable. "What are your terms?" he asked, the words bitter in his mouth. "The same as before," Captain Hana replied. "Immediate withdrawal from human space and recognition of our sovereignty. We have no interest in conquest, Commander. We simply wish to be left in peace." As Da contemplated the human captain's words, Officer Tai approached his command chair and spoke quietly. "Sir, I've completed my analysis. If this is merely a patrol vessel as they claim, we must consider what their actual warships might be capable of." The thought sent a shiver through Da's body. This single vessel had disabled half his fleet without sustaining significant damage. if the humans deployed their true military might. Prepare to accept their terms, Dai said, his voice hollow with defeat. The Hegemony Council will need to reassess our entire understanding of this species. As he looked at the image of the human captain on his screen, Dai wondered how many other primitive species the Hegemony had underestimated in their 1,000-year expansion, and for the first time in his career, he questioned whether the Hegemony's path of conquest was sustainable in a galaxy with species like humanity. The Vigilance seemed to vanish between attack runs, its stealth technology confounding Hegemony sensors. Each time it reappeared, another Hegemony vessel suffered critical damage. EMP weapons detected. Officer Jun reported as ship after ship lost shields and communications. Sir, we've intercepted their transmissions. The Vigilant is just a patrol ship, not even a dedicated warship. Dai's exoskeleton paled. That's not possible. The human captain's face appeared again on the view screen. Commander Dai, I'm offering you one final opportunity to withdraw. Your fleet has suffered enough casualties. Pride overrode Dai's growing sense of dread. The Hegemony does not retreat. Then you leave us no choice, Captain Hannah replied, her voice tinged with what might have been regret. Multiple new energy signatures bloomed on the tactical display. Dai stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. The signatures were appearing at the system's edge, far from any recognized jump points. How had they arrived without using the established FTL corridors? It was as if they had simply materialized from nowhere. 7 new contacts, Officer Jun reported, her voice shaking. Configuration unknown, but size and energy output suggest capital ships. They're much larger than the Vigilant. Dai's mandibles clicked rapidly as stress hormones flooded his system. Show me. The main view screen shifted to display the approaching vessels. Unlike the sleek, almost delicate appearance of the Vigilant, these ships were massive and imposing. Their hulls were angular and dark, absorbing rather than reflecting light. Red running lights pulsed along their sides like the heartbeat of some great predator. They're hailing us, the communications officer announced. Dai straightened his posture and adjusted his ceremonial cloak. Even in defeat, a Hegemony commander must maintain dignity. On screen, the face that appeared was not Captain Hannah's. This human male wore a dark uniform with gold insignia at the collar. His face was lined with age, his eyes hard and evaluating. Commander Dai of the Hegemony expansion fleet, the human said, not phrasing it as a question. This is Admiral Jin of the United Nations, Space Navy 7th Fleet. Your forces have engaged in unprovoked hostilities against a human vessel in sovereign space. This constitutes an act of war. Dai fought to keep his voice steady. Admiral, there has been a misunderstanding. We were merely conducting standard expansion protocol. By firing upon our patrol vessel after being warned to withdraw, the Admiral cut him off. Our sensors recorded the entire exchange. There is no misunderstanding. On the tactical display, the 7 human warships had formed a precise formation, surrounding what remained of the Hegemony fleet. Their positioning was flawless, cutting off any possible escape vector. Sir, Officer Ta whispered from beside Dai's command chair, preliminary analysis suggests these vessels outclass our own by at least 2 technological generations. Their weapon systems are concerning. Dai ignored him, focusing on the human admiral. What are your intentions? That depends on your next actions. Admiral Jin replied. Captain Hannah offered you withdrawal. That offer stands, but only for the next 5 minutes. After that, we will consider your continued presence an ongoing act of aggression and respond accordingly. Pride and training warred within Dai's mind. The Hegemony did not retreat. It did not surrender. In 1,000 years of expansion, it had never backed down from a confrontation. But neither had it faced anything like this. How do we know you will allow us to leave peacefully? Dai asked, playing for time as he assessed his options. The Admiral's expression didn't change. Because unlike you, Commander, we prefer diplomacy to conquest. Had you responded to Captain Hana's initial warning with respect rather than threats, this entire confrontation could have been avoided. On a secondary screen, Dai could see the Vigilant taking up position alongside the newly arrived warships. Despite all it had done to his fleet, the patrol ship looked tiny next to the capital vessels. "Sir," Officer June reported urgently, "I'm detecting energy buildups in the human vessels. They're charging weapons systems." Dai's mind raced. Half his fleet was already disabled. The remaining ships were scattered, their formation broken. And now they faced 7 capital ships of unknown, but clearly superior capability. The logical decision was obvious, but Hegemony doctrine forbade retreat. 4 minutes remaining, Commander, Admiral Jin noted calmly. Dai made his decision. Signal all operational vessels. Prepare for simultaneous attack on the human flagship. Maximum firepower. We will show these humans the might of the Hegemony. His officers exchanged alarmed glances, but began carrying out his orders. The remaining Hegemony ships adjusted their positions, weapons systems charging. "Sir," Officer Ta said quietly, "this course of action has a projected success rate of less than 3%. I must formally note my objection." "Noted," Dai replied coldly. "The Hegemony does not calculate odds. It overcomes them." The tactical display showed his 20 remaining combat-effective ships moving into attack formation. It would be glorious, even in defeat. Songs would be sung of Commander Dai, who faced impossible odds rather than surrender. "All ships report ready, Commander," Officer June announced. Dai raised his hand, prepared to give the order to fire. "For the glory of the Hegemony, all ships, fire." His words died in his throat as alarms blared across the command center. The tactical display flickered, showing incomprehensible readings. "What's happening?" Dai demanded. Officer June's hands flew across her console. "The humans. They are using some kind of gravity weapon. They're creating localized distortions in space-time." On the main view screen, Dai watched in horror as one of the human capital ships fired what appeared to be a pulse of distorted light. Where it struck, space itself seemed to warp and twist. 3 Hegemony cruisers caught in the effect were pulled together, their hulls crumpling as if crushed by an invisible hand. "How is this possible?" Dai whispered, all thoughts of glorious last stands forgotten. Before anyone could answer, another human ship fired. This weapon was different. A beam of coherent energy that precisely targeted the weapons emplacements on 5 Hegemony vessels simultaneously, slicing through shields and armor as if they weren't there. "All ships, hold fire," Dai ordered frantically. "Hold fire." But it was too late. The coordinated Hegemony attack had begun, with what remained of his fleet firing on the human flagship. The energy beams and projectiles converged on the massive vessel and vanished into what appeared to be a hole in reality surrounding the ship. A perfect black sphere had appeared around the human flagship, absorbing every attack without effect. "What am I seeing?" Dai asked, his voice barely audible. Officer Ta stared at his readings in disbelief. They appear to have created a contained singularity as a defensive measure, a controlled black hole. The black sphere disappeared as suddenly as it had formed. The human flagship was completely undamaged. Admiral Jin's face reappeared on the view screen. "A poor decision, Commander, but not unexpected. We understand the Hegemony's reluctance to break with tradition. Perhaps this demonstration will help your leaders reconsider their expansion policies." The tactical display flashed warnings as all 7 human capital ships fired simultaneously. Not at the Hegemony vessels, but at precise points in space between them. Reality tore open. Swirling vortices appeared, pulling the Hegemony ships into their grasp. Dad watched in horror as vessel after vessel was drawn into the miniature wormholes, disappearing from both sensors and visual observation. "They're gone," Officer June reported, her voice hollow with shock. 15 ships, just gone. "Not destroyed," Tai corrected, studying his readings. "Transported. The humans have created targeted wormholes. I'm detecting our ships, approximately 2 light-years from our current position. Day could hardly process what he was hearing. Transportation technology, controlled wormholes. These were theoretical concepts the Hegemony had deemed impossible. Only his flagship and 4 other vessels remained in their original positions, untouched by the human weapons. "Your fleet has been neutralized, Commander," Admiral Jin stated. "Those ships we relocated will require several days to return, assuming their FTL systems remain functional. You are now outnumbered and outgunned. Will you reconsider your position on withdrawal?" Day looked around his command center. His officers stared back, their postures communicating what they couldn't say aloud. The battle was lost. Continuing would mean destruction, not glory. For the first time in his career, Commander Dai of the Galactic Hegemony prepared to retreat. "We will withdraw," he said, the words bitter in his mouth. "Under protest, the Hegemony Council will hear of this unprovoked aggression." Admiral Jin's expression remained neutral. "They will also hear of your unprovoked attack on our patrol vessel after clear warnings. I suggest your report be accurate, Commander. We have shared all sensor data of this encounter with our allies throughout this sector." As the transmission ended, Dai slumped in his command chair. In a single day, he had lost not just a battle but something far more valuable, the myth of Hegemony invincibility. "Set course for Hegemony space," he ordered quietly. "We have much to report to the Council." And as his damaged flagship limped away from the human system, Dai wondered if this day marked not just a personal defeat, but the beginning of the end for the Hegemony's 1,000-year expansion. 7 human vessels emerged from FTL, their hulls sleek and purposeful. The largest displayed markings identifying it as the UNSS Indomitable. "This is Admiral Sun of the United Nations Space Navy," announced the stern-faced human male. "Your fleet is now surrounded." The human vessels deployed in a precise formation that trapped the remaining Hegemony ships in a tactical vice. What followed wasn't battle. It was demonstration. The humans revealed weapons that manipulated gravity itself, tearing Hegemony ships apart without firing a single projectile. "We've intercepted their fleet communications," Officer Tay reported, mandibles trembling. "Sir, the humans developed these weapons after a previous hostile first contact. They've been expecting something like us." Day watched as his proud fleet was systematically dismantled. We didn't understand what we were facing." The largest human vessel, the UNSS Indomitable, moved to the center of the formation. It dwarfed the Vigilant, stretching nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its dark hull absorbed the light of the system's star, making it appear like a moving shadow against the stars. "All remaining Hegemony vessels, power down your weapon systems immediately," Admiral Sun commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Any ship that fails to comply will be neutralized." Day stared at the tactical display. His once proud fleet of 50 warships had been reduced to just 5 operational vessels. The rest were either destroyed, disabled, or had been transported away by the humans' impossible technology. "Should we comply, Commander?" Officer June asked, fear evident in her voice. Before Dai could answer, the humans demonstrated their resolve. The Indomitable released what appeared to be a small probe. It moved slowly toward one of the damaged Hegemony cruisers that had not yet powered down its weapons. "What are they doing?" Dai wondered aloud. The probe stopped 100 meters from the Hegemony vessel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a sphere of distorted space expanded outward from the probe. Where it touched the cruiser, metal simply ceased to exist. The sphere passed through the ship, leaving perfect spherical voids in its wake. Within seconds, the cruiser broke apart, its structural integrity compromised. They erased the matter," Officer Ta whispered in horror. "They didn't destroy it. They removed it from existence." "Power down all weapons," Dot ordered, his voice cracking with urgency. Now, his officers rushed to comply. Throughout his flagship, weapon systems went offline one by one. The remaining Hegemony vessels followed suit. Admiral Sun's face reappeared on the view screen. A wise decision, Commander. Now, I believe we have matters to discuss. The human admiral's image was replaced by a view of what appeared to be a conference room aboard the Indomitable. You will transport to my vessel in 30 minutes for preliminary negotiations. You may bring 2 officers. No weapons. The transmission cut off before Dai could respond. Sir, Officer Ta said quietly, I've completed my analysis of the human vessels. Would you like to hear it before we meet with them? Day nodded numbly. The technology they're displaying is beyond anything in Hegemony records. Their gravity manipulation weapons, matter erasure technology, and transportation systems are all theoretical concepts our scientists deemed impossible. Tay's voice dropped lower. But most concerning is what I found in their intercepted communications. He brought up a data screen showing translated human messages. According to this, 53 years ago, humans encountered another expansionist species called the Corvin. First contact went poorly. The Corvin attempted to subjugate Earth, believing humans to be primitive. Tai scrolled through more data. The Corvin were defeated, but at great cost to human lives and infrastructure. After that event, humans dedicated enormous resources to developing defensive and offensive technologies specifically designed to counter alien threats. Daz's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession as he processed this information. They've been preparing for us, or someone like us. Yes, sir, Tai confirmed. And based on their communications, the Vigilant was intentionally placed at the edge of their territory as a test to see how potential aggressors would respond to a seemingly isolated vessel. A test we failed, Daz said bitterly. 30 minutes later, Day found himself standing in a transport room aboard his flagship with Officer Tai and Officer Jun. All 3 wore their formal uniforms, devoid of the ceremonial weapons that would normally accompany them. Transporting now, the technician announced. Day expected to feel the familiar sensation of molecular disassembly used in hegemony transporters. Instead, there was simply a brief moment of disorientation, and then they were standing in a similar room aboard the Indomitable. No light, no energy, no sensation of movement. They had simply been relocated. A human female in a dark uniform approached them. Commander Da, I am Lieutenant Bin. Admiral Sun is waiting for you in the conference room. Please follow me. As they walked through the corridors of the human vessel, Dai couldn't help but notice the differences from Hegemony design. Where Hegemony ships were utilitarian and angular, focused purely on function, the human vessel combined functionality with an aesthetic that was almost artistic. Curved walls, integrated lighting that adjusted to match their path, and most surprisingly, plant life incorporated into the vessel's design. You maintain biological organisms aboard your warships? Dai asked the lieutenant. Yes, she replied without slowing her pace. They serve both practical and psychological purposes: air purification, food production, and maintaining connection to our homeworld. The conference room, when they reached it, continued this theme. One entire wall was a living garden, with water flowing down a carefully constructed rock face into a small pool. Admiral Sun sat at a large table of what appeared to be actual wood, not synthesized material. Commander Dai, he greeted, standing. Please, be seated. As they took their places, Dai noticed Captain Hana was also present, sitting to the Admiral's right. Her expression remained as calm and composed as it had been throughout their confrontation. Before we begin formal discussions, Admiral Sun said, I believe some context is necessary. You attacked us believing we were a primitive species, easily conquered. This misunderstanding could have been avoided with basic research. A holographic display activated above the table, showing the human home system, Earth and its colonies throughout their solar system. 53 years ago, we faced our first alien contact, the Admiral continued. The Corvin Dominion arrived with 27 warships and demanded our immediate surrender. When we refused, they attacked our orbital defenses and major cities. The display showed images of devastation, human structures in ruins, massive craters where cities had once stood. "We were unprepared," Admiral Sun said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "But we adapted quickly." The Corvin expected an easy victory. Instead, they found that humans have one trait above all others. We are incredibly dangerous when cornered. The display shifted to show human vessels engaging alien ships. Despite being clearly outmatched technologically, the human ships fought with what Day could only describe as ferocious determination. "We lost 2 billion lives," the Admiral stated flatly, "but we prevailed. The Corvin fleet was destroyed, and we captured their technology." From that day forward, humanity united with a single purpose. Never again would we be vulnerable. Day felt a chill run through his body as he began to truly understand what they had stumbled into. The past 5 decades have seen us advance our technology at a pace that would normally take centuries. Admiral Sun continued. "We reversed engineered Corvin systems, then improved upon them. We developed our own unique technologies based on theoretical concepts the Corvin had never explored." The display showed a timeline of human technological development, a near-vertical line of advancement that defied normal evolutionary patterns. And all of this, the Admiral concluded, was focused on a single goal: defending ourselves against the next expansionist empire that decided humans would make good subjects. He fixed Da with a penetrating stare. "That empire, Commander, turned out to be yours." Day struggled to find his voice. "The Hegemony had no knowledge of your previous contact or your true technological level," our intelligence suggested. "Your intelligence was exactly what we wanted potential aggressors to see," Captain Hana interrupted. "We've been selectively leaking information for decades, presenting ourselves as a recently space-faring species with minimal defensive capabilities." "A trap," Daz said quietly. "A test," Admiral Sun corrected. "Those who approached with peaceful intentions found us to be generous allies and trading partners. Those who came with conquest in mind." He gestured toward the window, where the remains of the Hegemony fleet drifted in space. Day looked at his officers. Tay's expression was one of professional fascination despite their situation. June looked terrified. "What happens now?" Day asked. Admiral Sun leaned forward. "That depends on the Hegemony. We have no interest in war, Commander. We simply wish to exist without threat of conquest. But make no mistake, if your leaders decide to pursue hostilities against humanity, what happened today was merely a preview of our capabilities." For the first time since the encounter began, Dai fully understood the scale of the Hegemony's miscalculation. They hadn't just underestimated a primitive species. They had threatened a civilization that had spent half a century preparing specifically for this moment. "I will convey your position to the Hegemony Council," Daz said formally, "and I will recommend in the strongest possible terms that we seek peaceful relations with humanity." As he spoke these words no Hegemony commander had ever spoken before, Day realized that his civilization stood at a crossroads. Continue their path of conquest and face a war they could not win, or adapt to a galaxy where not every species would bow before the Hegemony. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same again. "The terms are non-negotiable," Admiral Sun stated firmly. "Recognition of human space, a non-aggression pact, and limited technology exchange." Commander Da, now representing the remnants of his once proud fleet, could only nod in agreement. The Hegemony Council would be furious, but he had no choice. 28 of his 50 ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest were combat ineffective. "The Hegemony has never encountered a species like yours," Dai admitted. "We misjudged you." Captain Hana, standing beside Admiral Sun, nodded. "A common mistake. But perhaps something valuable can come from this unfortunate first meeting." In the months that followed, diplomatic channels opened between humans and the Hegemony. The Council, for the first time in millennia, was forced to revise its expansion doctrine. The most shocking revelation came during the Third Diplomatic Summit. Humans had been aware of the galactic community for decades, silently preparing while appearing primitive to outside observers. Throughout the galaxy, the news spread quickly. A young species had defeated the undefeated Hegemony. The balance of power would never be the same again. Commander Dai stood before the 9 members of the Hegemony High Council, feeling smaller than he ever had in his life. The circular chamber was designed to intimidate, with the council members seated on elevated platforms looking down at those who came to address them. Today, that ancient architectural trick was working perfectly. "You signed this?" Councillor Min asked, her voice dripping with disgust as she held up the treaty. "Without consulting the council, without seeking approval." Day fought to keep his posture straight. "I had no choice, Councillor. Our fleet was defeated. Continuing to fight would have meant total destruction." "Better destruction than dishonor," shouted Councillor Wu, the oldest and most traditional member. "The Hegemony does not retreat. The Hegemony does not surrender. These have been our principles for 1,000 years." Day took a deep breath. "With respect, Councillor, principles cannot stand against gravity weapons and matter-erasure technology. The humans possess capabilities we previously considered theoretical." He activated a holographic display, showing recordings from the battle. The council members watched in silence as the human vessels demonstrated their technological superiority, dismantling the Hegemony fleet with surgical precision. "This is one engagement," Councillor Jin said dismissively when the recording ended. "One fleet. We have thousands more ships. We can overwhelm these humans with numbers." Intelligence Officer Tai, who had been permitted to accompany Da, stepped forward. "That strategy would fail, Councillor. Analysis of human communications indicates they have established defensive positions throughout their territory, with weapons far more powerful than those they demonstrated against our fleet." Ta displayed another hologram, this one showing intercepted human military communications. "They possess automated defense platforms capable of destroying hundreds of ships simultaneously, and their homeworld is protected by technology that could, in their words, turn an entire fleet into its component atoms." Silence fell over the council chamber as the implications sank in. "How?" Councillor Min finally asked. "How did a species achieve this level of technology so quickly? Our intelligence indicated they developed FTL travel less than a century ago. Such advancement is unprecedented." Day exchanged glances with Ta. "They had help, Councillor. 53 years ago, they were attacked by the Corvan Dominion." Several council members hissed in recognition of the name. "We believe the Corvan were wiped out in an internal civil war," Councillor Jin said. "No," Day replied. "They were destroyed by humans after attempting to conquer Earth. The humans captured Corvan technology, reverse-engineered it, and then improved upon it. They've spent the last 5 decades preparing for another invasion, which we unfortunately provided." The council chamber erupted in heated discussion. Day stood silently, waiting for the noise to subside. When it finally did, Councillor Min addressed him again. "These terms," she said, holding up the treaty. "Assessment." Day straightened. "They are surprisingly lenient, given the humans' position of strength. They demand recognition of their sovereign territory, a non-aggression pact, and limited technology exchange." Technology exchange? Councillor Wu scoffed. What could these upstarts possibly offer the Hegemony? Their gravity manipulation technology alone would revolutionize our shipbuilding and planetary development capabilities, Tai interjected. And their medical science is decades ahead of ours. They have offered cures for 3 diseases that still plague Hegemony worlds. Another round of murmurs filled the chamber. Most importantly, Da continued when quiet returned, they are not demanding reparations for our unprovoked attack, nor are they asking for territory or resources. They simply want to be left in peace, or they are buying time to prepare for their own expansion, Councillor Jin suggested darkly. Day shook his head. I spent months negotiating with them. I do not believe conquest is their goal. They are different from us, different from any species the Hegemony has encountered. 6 months later, Day found himself back in space, aboard a diplomatic vessel approaching Earth. As the official Hegemony ambassador to humanity, he was leading the first formal delegation to the human homeworld. Captain Hannah, now promoted to Commodore, had been assigned as his liaison. Her ship, a new vessel called the Concordat, escorted the Hegemony delegation through human space. "We're approaching Earth defense perimeter," Commodore Hannah announced over the communication channel. "You'll be scanned and then cleared for approach to Orbital Station Unity." Day stood on the bridge of his vessel, watching as they passed massive human defense platforms. Each one bristled with weapons that made his exoskeleton tighten involuntarily. "Your defenses are impressive," he commented to Hannah. Her image on the view screen showed a small smile. "These are just the visible ones, Ambassador." The implication wasn't lost on Da. The humans were making sure the Hegemony understood their defensive capabilities. As they approached the massive orbital station, Dai was struck by its design. Unlike the purely functional Hegemony stations, Unity was beautiful. Its curved, spiraling structure incorporated gardens and water features visible even from a distance. Yet Dai knew from intelligence reports that the station also housed powerful weapon systems and could transform into a battle station within minutes. Beauty and deadliness combined, it seemed to epitomize humanity. The diplomatic reception was held in a vast chamber with one transparent wall, offering a stunning view of Earth below. Representatives from every human nation were present, along with those from the Mars and Europa colonies. Ambassador Dai greeted Admiral Sun, now serving as Earth's defense minister. "Welcome to Unity Station." Day performed the formal Hegemony greeting. "The Council sends its regards and hopes for productive discussions." Sun nodded. "We're particularly interested in discussing the technology exchange provisions. Our scientists have prepared several proposals they believe would benefit both our peoples." As the formal reception continued, Day found himself approached by an elderly human male using a mobility assistance device. "Ambassador," the human said, "I am Dr. Han, lead cynobiologist on the first Corvin contact team." Day felt a chill run through him. This human had been present at the event that had shaped humanity's approach to galactic relations. "You've done something remarkable, Ambassador," Dr. Han continued. "You've helped prevent another war. The Hegemony's decision to recognize human sovereignty rather than pursue further conflict shows wisdom I didn't expect, based on our intelligence." The Council deliberated for many days, Dai admitted. "Not all were convinced. But the evidence of your technological superiority was persuasive." Dr. Han smiled. "Technology isn't everything, Ambassador. The Corvin had superior technology too, initially. Do you know why we ultimately prevailed against them?" Day tilted his head, curious. "Adaptability," the old human said simply. "Humans don't think like most species. When faced with overwhelming force, we don't surrender. We innovate. We find weaknesses. We change our tactics." The Corvin couldn't understand this. They kept fighting according to established doctrine, even when it was failing. "Much like the Hegemony," Daz said quietly. "Yes," Dr. Han nodded. "But unlike the Corvin, your people chose to adapt. That's why I believe there's hope for genuine peace between us." As the diplomatic mission continued over the following weeks, Day found himself reassessing everything he had believed about the Hegemony's place in the galaxy. For 1,000 years, they had expanded unchallenged, incorporating or subjugating hundreds of species. Now they faced a choice: continue that path and eventually face destruction at human hands, or adapt to a new reality where cooperation might prove more beneficial than conquest. The treaty was formally ratified 3 months later. For the first time in its history, the Hegemony recognized another species as equals rather than subjects. And throughout the galaxy, other species took notice. Some, long subjugated by Hegemony rule, began to whisper of resistance. Others, who had hidden their technological advances for fear of drawing attention, began reaching out to humanity as potential allies. The balance of power shifted, not through a great war, but through a single encounter between an alien fleet and a human warship, and the wisdom to recognize when the old ways no longer served. As Dai prepared to return to Hegemony space with the signed treaty, Commodore Hannah approached him at the departure ceremony. "A gift," she said, handing him a small data crystal. "Historical records of Earth's development. I thought you might find it educational." Day accepted the crystal with a formal bow. "Thank you, Commodore. I hope our people's next meeting will be under better circumstances than our first." Hannah smiled. "I believe it will be, Ambassador. After all, the greatest regret can lead to the greatest growth."